Hi there. So you have ordered a kit for the week 1 summer camp, which is collage methods inspired by Eric Carle, Ezra Jack Keats, Leo Leone, and we are going to make a couple different art projects using the materials in your box. So for the first one and the second one, we are going to need to paint a strip of paper in a few different colors and blends of colors. We're going to practice using some texture techniques. So we're going to use things such as a sponge, any kind of kitchen sponge. This is included in your kit, but if you need extra, you can always use a kitchen sponge or any type of sponge. You should have some tulle in your kit. You should have some packing material that has some nice texture in it. And you will have a plastic knife. This knife is actually compostable. You will need your paintbrushes that came in your kit. And you should have 6 different colors. One of them is not a color, it is white. And you will have those ready. I have mine in my palette, but you will have yours in little jars. And you can put them in the palette that comes with it. You should have some water, a cup of water to rinse, and your roll of paper. So we're going to paint section by section, blending the colors to make a longer strip of different colored paper that you can later cut out when it's dry and make your collage out of. So I'm just going to show you some different ways to make the paper look textured. Texturing means that you are applying different brush strokes or pressure, or let's say this brush is kind of square, so you're making prints, but then this one is round, so maybe you're doing some swirls. So you're making different shapes so that it looks different when you cut it out. It's not just one solid green color. It will be different shades of green. So I have an example here of an Eric Carle sunflower, and the greens have some yellow in them, some dark green, some light green. The yellows have some orange and some reds and light yellows and dark yellows. So there's little dot marks made in the brown and in the center of the green. So we're going to learn how to do this, and then we will cut out the painted paper into the shapes that we need. First, I'm going to start with using one of the primary colors. So we have yellow, red, and blue that make up the primary colors, and you can mix those colors with each other to make other colors. So for example, if you mixed yellow with red, you would make orange, and if you mixed red with blue, you would make purple, and if you mixed blue with yellow, you would make green. I have also added some brown and some turquoise and a little bit of white. So let's get started. I'm going to put my texture materials away as I don't need that yet. I'm going to grab my largest brush right now, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to just start painting onto my paper. And notice I'm not spending a whole lot of time in one spot because this is going to be just very free. I'm just gonna move my brush across like this. And so when I talked about blending, what I'm gonna do now, and I'm not gonna worry too much about rinsing my brush. Usually you would rinse your brush so you don't get the colors into the color that you've already made, but we want to bring that color into the color we've already made. So I'm gonna get a little dab of red, and I'm gonna start blending it into the yellow that I've made. Do you see how I'm not going like this with my brush, but I'm dabbing my brush and I'm blending it? This is where we can use a tool like a sponge and sort of push the color into the yellow. I'm rubbing it and scraping it, and when it starts to feel dry, we'll get a little more. This part is really fun. So now I'm getting into more of a red color. Do you see how I have yellow, orange, and now I'm getting into red. So I'm going to paint a little bit of red here. So remember, all these colors, we're going to cut. So let's say you want to make a flower that's yellow. You'll cut little pieces out of this yellow part and maybe add a little orange into it. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's however you want it to look. I'm just gonna bring my brush across the paper and just fill it up with red. And if you want to add a little bit more of the orange, like I'm noticing I've got a lot of red and a lot of yellow, but not too much orange. So what I can do is I can go back to my yellow, and I have yellow and red on my brush. I'm just gonna come over here, back to my orange space. If you feel like any of your color spaces are shrinking, then just add another bit of color. Now, if I wanted to go back and add just yellow to this side, then I would rinse my brush. So here's another opportunity to use another one of your tools to make some, so you can tear off. I'm tearing off a little bit of this packing paper, and I'm going to scrunch it up in my hands like this. And I'm going to dip it into the yellow, and I'm going to blot. And I'm going to blot it onto where my red is too. This paper will allow the paint to dry really quickly, so you want to work a little quickly. See how I'm getting some nice textures in here? Now I'm going to get my knife, and I'm going to scrape a little yellow. I'm going to scrape it into the paper. Be careful not to tear the paper, but it's really fun to get different variations of lines or scribble marks. I'm just scraping that paint. So I'm going to continue with my red over here, just showing you different ways to use your tools. Speaking of, we'll use the tulle next, which is this kind of fluffy stuff that they make like ballet skirts out of. So now I'm going to grab a little bit of blue, because do you remember red and blue makes purple? So I'm going to start adding a little blue over here into my red. Maybe add a little more red. Now, if you see that, I'm noticing that mine's starting to get a little brown, which means that I had a little yellow in my brush still. So I'm just going to rinse my brush a little. So maybe when you go over to the blue, you probably want to rinse your brush. And you can blot it on the other side of your sponge, or you can get a paper towel. So I'm going to start blending red and blue together, which makes purple. And again, my purple probably won't be as nice as your purple because I mistakenly put a little yellow in it. Now here's where you can just have fun with this. If you think about it, you can add a little turquoise. Ooh, what does that do? Look at that. So look how many different colors we have to work with when we start cutting out paper for our collage. So I'm going to use some of this tulle here. I'm going to go back to the regular blue. And I'm going to just kind of start blotting this texture here. Look how beautiful that looks. Over here, maybe add a little more red. It's okay if these mix a little. It's the fun part about it. We can start making more. It doesn't have to be in any way, as long as you have the colors that you want. So, I'm going to actually move from, I'm going to add a little bit more blue, and I'm going to add a little yellow so that I have some green to work with. So I'm going to come over here with my paintbrush. I want this a little more solid. And what should I add with blue to make green? Yellow. And I'm just going to scoop it in there. And now I'm starting to make some green. You can add a little turquoise in there, which changes the green color quite a bit. Oops. Roll this down a little bit. So we've got some nice green color here. Adding a little more yellow. A little more blue. Maybe a little more of this packing material. Scrape it together so you can see they've got some very beautiful patterns going on here. So now what you have is a long sheet of rainbow colors that you can use to cut out. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, don't be afraid to use your fingers. You can smear the paint with your fingers. When it starts to dry, it's really fun to smear the wet paint into the dry paint, because then you can still see the paint underneath, but then add some new texture. So finger painting is also really fun for this. And now you have your painted paper, and this is step 1 in making our Eric Carle, Leo Leone, and Ezra Jack Keats inspired collage.